Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new video for the Machine Quilting Block Party. Today we're quilting our 10th block with a combination of pebbling, sharp stippling, and matrix. And I'm going to quilt it with a combination of free motion quilting and walking foot quilting. So you're sure to learn a lot of tips and tricks for machine quilting, so let's get started. So I'm getting started in the center of the block, but I've actually already went on ahead and stitched it in the ditch. You can see I have actually run orange thread around the square in the square block, around the orange, the red triangles, and the perimeter. So this block is already very secure. And I got started down here on the point of the sunshine and stitched my way into the center, and now I'm going to stitch around that center circle. And I'm doing it this way simply so that I have an easy way to escape from this sun symbol. I want to be able to get down into the red areas and fill them in with pebbling. And so I kind of thought ahead and got started in a good place. So now quilting around this center sun, this is probably the trickiest spot because I really want to stay right on that line and I want to quilt that circle nice and smooth. So it's just careful, slow stitching all the way around. Don't panic if you wobble or stitch off the line. You can always kind of disguise that a little bit by filling it in with the design. Like if you wanted to fill that in with pebbling, that'd be a great choice. So now we're going to swing around and quilt these little wiggly flames. You can see I can speed up quite a bit as I stitch these. I'm just going to bounce against that center circle, wiggle out, bounce against the point. And if you're having trouble forming sharp points and making them nice and pointy, you might want to do it this way where you stitch the line, the wiggly line, and then make a complete stop. And then maybe even shift your hands around a little bit. That forces you to really stop and think about it and make a nice smooth direction change. So that might be a helpful tip. So as you can see, it's really quick quilting. Just come right into the tip and come right back out. Watch out for those long tips. You're going to run up against some seam allowance and that might bind up your foot a little bit. So just watch out for that. You can see it's nice and quick. As you get better at forming points, you can do it as a smooth transition. So I slow down slightly and then speed back up. And that's just speed control. That's just my foot on the foot pedal, kind of anticipating what my hands are going to do and pressing down harder when I have kind of a nice smooth straightaway, but then immediately letting off the gas as I know I'm going to come into a tricky spot. So it's just speed control. A lot of people ask me about stitch regulators and if I use a stitch regulator. That was just a question that I received a few days ago. And the answer is no, I don't use a stitch regulator because my foot is doing the job for me. And I played around with them quite a bit and I think that they're certainly helpful in the beginning, but they're kind of like training wheels. You're going to grow out of them pretty quickly. And it's really a very expensive piece of equipment. So personally, my advice is stick with it, keep practicing, keep working at it, and especially, just start finding different speeds in your foot pedal and learning how to control that speed so that you can, come into an area, slow down, stop dead, speed up a bit. It's just bringing the focus and the attention to your foot pedal, so that you're paying attention to it at all times. You really know how to operate it. And that just takes practice. It's just repetition and practice, which, by our 10th block, you're probably seeing some definite improvement in your skills. So now I'm coming up here and meeting up with this last ray of the sun. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use that little point as an escape hatch. So I'm just going to carefully stitch right across those seams. And now these orange sections are going to be filled with sharp stippling, and I'm actually going to fill them in white thread. So I'm going to wait to fill them in right now, but I have orange thread already loaded, so I'm going to go on ahead and fill in these red areas with pebbling. And that's just my own design choice. I just looked at the block and was like, well, what color do I want everything to be? And I decided I really wanted the pebbling to be orange stitched over the red sections. So what this design entails is just stitching circles, and you can see I ended up with a tight little spot here, so I'm just carefully stitching, carefully filling this in, and then travel stitching around. And now I'm just going to form circle shapes, stacking them together. It's just swing out and around, travel stitch, get to another open space, form another circle, travel stitch around it, form another circle. You are going to use those ditches to stitch in the ditch and travel stitch quite a bit. That's why I went on ahead and ditched the block to begin, because I knew that that would be helpful. I knew I would use those ditches, I knew I would run up against those lines, and so I wanted them to be secured before I went into this area with my pebbling. Now something I just did that was really helpful is I dropped my foot just a bit. So this is a foot that is adjustable. There's a little spring here that allows me to adjust the height of it, and I just nudged it down ever so slightly, and what that does is it makes the foot slightly squish the surface of my block, and I don't want it to be too much, but I want it to squish it just enough to slow me down. And that helps me form the circles more accurately and with nice small stitches. I find sometimes that my hands want to speed up too much and it starts looking sloppy, and especially when I'm travel stitching, I like to have the foot just ever so slightly lower on the surface of the quilt, and that helps me kind of stay in better control. It's just a technique that I'm able to use with this particular foot. Now, not all feet have that little spring, but I kind of figure, hey, if you've got something like that, if you've got a feature like that, you might as well use it. Now, as you can see, sometimes my circles don't come out very circular. That one ends up looking a little bit like a jelly bean. That's okay. If you find yourself struggling with it, then you can definitely mark the circles using your pattern and your marking diagram. That's just fine. You know, it's one of those things that sometimes you can't see behind the foot as you're quilting. Can't see what's behind you, and you might end up stitching something a little bit weird, but in the end, I think whenever you step back and look at it, all the shapes are going to generally look circular, and your eye's not going to really get caught by any of the random weird shapes that end up the wobbly ones. So here I'm filling in the last few circles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this kind of flow that I've got going on. I'm going to work my way to the tip, and then I'm going to stitch around the border. I'm going to use the border to connect me to the next triangle shape. And by doing it that way, I can basically knock out more space, more quilting, and move around the block without having to stitch in the ditch. So all of those things are good things. And also just continue to get more of it quilted in pretty much the least amount of time. So that's really where that decision is coming from. So sometimes you're going to have to cut circles in half, just like this, or cut them into a quarter. That's a-okay. So now I've got one last circle to fill in, and then I'm just going to escape right there and stitch some of my border design. So this is just wiggly dot to dot. So just wiggle up to the point, and then wiggle back down, and wiggle back out, and wiggle back down. It's very simple quilting. It's design that we've used in every single block. And what I love about it is that you don't have to mark it. You can have your own kind of wiggly, unique bent to it. And it's so easy. Just focus on the dots, stitch out and connect, and stitch back and connect with the perimeter of the block. It's so, so easy. In the corners, we have this little triangle shape. I quilt up to it. Give you some tips for quilting it. So what I like to do, make a connection with the corner and just stitch nice and straight. Come to a stop on those points, so that way we're sure they're nice and pointy. And then return to that corner of the block, and then rotate, and you can start the next side. So that's the border design, and you can see where I'm going to go from here. Basically, I'm going to work my border design down this line, connect with this red triangle, fill it in with pebbling. I'll probably escape over here across this top part of the orange square and square block, just travel stitch over, and then fill in this triangle with pebbling. So that's how I'll work my way around the block, filling in with these particular designs. So I'll meet you back here when we're ready to change to white thread and fill in these orange sections with sharp stippling. So I've finished up all of my pebbling, and now I've pulled up thread and started quilting this beautiful sharp stippling in the orange triangles. And I am quilting this ever so slightly denser than what I designed for the pattern, and that's just simply my own design choice again. I just really like the idea of having that on a slightly smaller scale, having those lines of quilting come together a little bit tighter. This is always one of those things that you can play with. You can go a little dense in a particular area, like these little triangles. It's not going to make your entire quilt dense or stiff. It's just going to add that little extra pop of texture and interest, and it's going to also add more of that thread color to the surface, which I think really broke up the block nicely. So just a design choice. You can see how I'm quilting the sharp stippling design. This is just a wiggly line, and occasionally I come to sharp points. So if you're familiar with regular stippling, that's a wiggly line with no points. And one of the rules of both designs is that you're not supposed to cross your lines of quilting. So be very careful to kind of work through it in a row. You can see I just worked, straight from one corner straight across to the opposite corner. I'm gonna do the exact same thing for you here. So I'm just going to wiggle in, start forming, and when I'm quilting this, I'm really thinking about flame shapes. So as I work my way down, I'm wiggling those flame shapes around, interlocking them, then I wiggle my way back up, and I'm maintaining that kind of long, snaky kind of shape. I've attached my walking foot and moved my Supreme slider off my feed dogs. That's important because the walking foot puts a lot more pressure and needs to connect with the feed dogs on the machine, so you want to make sure to move that if you're using one. And then now I am just quilting right along those marked lines for a matrix. And this is a really simple process, but it is a little time consuming because it's one of those things where you just have to kind of pick a line, and then as you quilt, get down to the opposite end, the opposite edge, and then just look around for the next closest line. And this is not always going to be perfect. You're going to have to do some travel stitching in the ditches, and that's okay. But it really is a lot easier than trying to figure out some kind of complicated path and make sure that you don't have to break thread at all. Just honestly, the easiest thing to do is just start stitching, and then every time you reach a ditch, look around and find the next closest line to hit. And this one is right here close by. And you're going to do a lot of rotation. It's walking foot quilting, so you have to be facing the right direction for it to feed through your machine. You always have to have it facing straight forward. But it's really not that bad. And the nice thing about it is your ditching will of course be perfect because you're stitching with a walking foot. And your lines and your stitch length will also be perfect. Now, could you quilt this in free motion? Absolutely. You could definitely quilt this design using free motion quilting instead. I like to do walking foot quilting with matrix just simply because I think it makes it look, I like the even stitch length. I like that my ditching comes out just exactly right. For all of those reasons, that's why I decided to switch to walking foot style quilting. But you don't have to if you don't want to. This is definitely something that's up to you. So right here, I've got two choices. I could go this way, or I could knock out these two little lines. This is something that's always going to happen. You're always going to be presented with different decisions. I'm going to go on ahead and quilt along those two little lines because I just don't want to leave them behind. And then I'll probably be able to reconnect with that line and stitch it at a later time or stitch it right now. I'll just have to see. If you ever overshoot your line, like you can see, I'm sometimes pulling my needle back out of the quilt. What I'm doing is rotating the hand wheel backwards. That doesn't work on all machines. I've heard from some quilters that say that that causes their machine to kind of gag and create a bird's nest, and it doesn't seem to like it. So you're going to have to play with that and see if that works for your machine. Basically, it's just a little trick where you rotate the hand wheel backwards and you're able to lift the needle and back up one stitch. It's something I use a lot because I often overshoot. I often overshoot my lines, and that's kind of a little get out of jail free card. But it doesn't work for all machines, unfortunately. So I'm just going to continue to knock out all of these lines just the exact same way. Every once in a while, like this one, I can see I'm not really close to anything in particular right here. I'm just going to probably travel stitch in the ditch to get to this next line and keep on going. There's no right or wrong way to do this, and let's say you accidentally end up, close to absolutely no lines, and it would be quite a lot of stitching in the ditch. Break thread. Just break thread and start again. Pick another line and get going again. It's not anything to obsess about or to worry about or overthink. Just get started, knock out some lines, and keep on quilting. And here's what it looks like whenever you finish block number 10. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you enjoyed learning how to piece and quilt this block with me this month. You can click right here to find the quilt pattern for block number 10 available at leahday.com. Don't forget to ask any questions you have about this process in the comments below. I'm always here to help you learn more about machine quilting. And if you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends, and of course subscribe to my channel on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new quilting videos I have coming out every week. Until next time, let's go quilt!